All right, you guys, I ordered a mic for you guys on Zoom. So I had a mic, you guys could hear well. And whenever it was Bluetooth. So whenever someone had a question, I could go and you guys could hear the question and the answer without getting frustrated because you can't hear what's going on. It didn't come in. So we're still, if you guys in the room have a question, I'm going to have to I'll rephrase the question for those on Zoom because we have about 20 people on Zoom. And then you guys answering the question will need to come to the mic. We're waiting on Terry Miller to get here. He should be here shortly, but we're going to go ahead and get started without him. And then we'll ask him to share his knowledge and expertise on solar panels in just a little bit. This class, if you're here for CE, if on Zoom, you got to have your camera on the entire time for CE credit. BJ is our monitor. So if you have any questions, chat her. And then if you are on Zoom, when you guys register on Eventbrite, we've streamlined the whole process with that registration because then we have a roster of everybody that attended. We have your email address and we know whether or not you're here for CE. So even if you're going to come in person, if y'all are going to, it works a lot better if you just register on the Eventbrite link. By Friday, BJ will send out, this last time it was on Monday and it's all my fault because she was waiting on me to send her something. But on Fridays, she will typically send the recap, give you guys a link to the YouTube recording of the class and provide the slides and any other handouts. So register online so that you get all of that stuff. This class was put together today because we're seeing more and more solar panels, and any of the transactions that we have done with solar panels, most of the professionals in the transaction did not know how to handle or even ask the right questions. And so whether or not you pull up to the listing and you notice solar panels, or you're going to go show the house and you notice solar panels, we've provided a checklist for you to get out so that you can ask all the questions that you need to ask so you know how to handle those solar panels. I asked a panel of experts to join me because I'm not an expert in this area. All I know is it causes snags on the transactions and nobody likes that. So, and in some cases, I know Tiffany is on this call, just a couple weeks ago, a contract was negotiated. Afterwards, they found out about the solar panel lien, and the buyer said, I can't afford that house and take over that payment. And so they canceled in option. So that's why we're just wanting to catch it all early. There should not be the emotions involved and all the work involved in writing a contract, negotiating, and getting all parties to sign it to find out that it just doesn't work in their budget because of the solar panels. And then Terry Miller. So I've asked Terry Miller to join us. He's still, I think, TES Energy. You guys, I'm not a titles person. I just know who to go to get what I need to keep transactions moving along. So if I ever goof up on somebody's title, it's not because I don't care or have respect for their title. But anyway, so Terry Miller is a expert in the solar panel. He's been installing solar panels all over the place in big projects and little projects. So I know that he can answer any of the questions that you guys have in regards to solar panels. So he'll be here shortly for that. And then JJ Simide from ABC Inspections, my buddy, been in the business for a long time, and I know he's starting to see these solar panels. So my curiosity on this for JJ, and I'll ask it later as we go, but if you were to remove the panels like Sarah had to experience on a transaction, what does that do for the roof? I mean, now surely there's some holes that have got to be addressed and all of that. So what happens in when those are installed? How much damage does it do to the roof that we need to be paying attention to? So if you are comfortable or be thinking about how you're going to answer that question. Okay. Okay, good. Well, you never know what I'm going to throw at you. So
they'll make it one of those.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I have Blaine Brawley from Goosehead here because solar panels, I mean, you've got something of value. I don't know what kind of liability is tied to solar panels being on a piece of property and any of the other things that you need to be considering whenever you are on the buyer side or the seller side representing someone and their solar panels on the home. And then Sean Kincannon thinks that him sitting in the room like a student is going to get him out of any kind of speaking. It's not working. The title side of things. And unfortunately, on the title side of things is how we learned about the whole solar panel process. Huh? Well, unfortunately, because we didn't realize it until the title commitment came out, which is further along in the transaction. I'd prefer to have it been at the beginning. So he'll cover all of the title side of the transaction. What do you need to know as a seller or buyer's rep whenever you get that title commitment? Number one, y'all need to be opening the title commitments and reading the title commitments. What's really important is read Schedule A of your title commitment. Make sure it matches your contract for the seller's name, the buyer's name, and how titles being transferred. Look at the legal description and make sure that that is right. All of the information that you need on Schedule A is based on the contract and how it was written and how title is going to be conveyed. B is a schedule you need to pay attention to, but those aren't anything that is in your control column. It is what it is, but you need to be aware of. C is something that you've got to pay attention to. C, Schedule C of your title commitment will tell you everything. That is like the title company's checklist of all of the things that have to be addressed before the title can be conveyed. So C is where you would see anything related to solar panels if there was any liens filed. Or B. Okay, cool. And so we're going to talk about that. One thing I didn't think to cover, and we don't have so many of, is HOAs in this area and solar panels and any of the restrictions. Because some of your buyers may not have solar panel on the house, but they may say, hey, we're thinking about going solar. What do you need to know and what questions or how do you need to prepare them in that scenario too? I'm in the process of, I'm looking at putting solar panels on my lake house because I wanted a house that even if storms hit, I still have a place to go and it's big enough for all of my kids and all their rugrats. So they're not really rugrats, they're really cute. That was kind of a mean word when you think about it, rugrats. Okay, I'm going to share the screen with you guys on Zoom and we're going to just jump right into this. I do have slides that will guide us, but I want you guys to ask questions because this is new for a lot of us. Those of you guys in the room, I have your CE roster and Sarah's going to pass that around. So make sure if you're here for CE, sign the roster. You do not have to sign the roster if you don't want CE, since this is not part of the series. All right, solar energy systems and their impact on mortgage financing. So here's the things that I wanted to be sure to cover. In these slides, there's not a ton of them, but there's a lot of information in them. And then those of you guys on Zoom, Friday, whenever you get a summary, you'll get the checklist that everybody has in their hands right now. BJ, make a note to see if there's any way we can attach. Never mind, I'll get with you. I'll get with you on my idea on how we get handouts to Zoom participants prior to the classes. Anyway, all right, so the 5 takeaways. So there's five different ways that solar panel, those solar panels could be paid for and installed in terms of the acquisition of the solar system. You guys mute so it's not double fed back. Okay. I was making sure you guys on Zoom can see. And then definitions of the UCC filing and the financing statement. That part is super important that you guys collect. So you have to be comfortable with what are you looking for and what are you asking for and what are you looking at whenever you do receive. And then how solar systems impact appraised values. And then lastly, we'll cover the documents needed from sellers before you guys put the property, the listing in the MLS. because that's going to have all of the information. And how do you even fill it out on the seller's disclosure? What do you need to tell somebody? Don't wait till the last minute to tell the lender too. You guys remember, the appraisal is our eyes and ears. That's how we learn about the property itself. However, we really would like to know anything that you know that applies to the mortgage loan prior to receiving the appraisal. Remember, right now, appraisals are 2 to 3 weeks out. And so if we don't know about the property until we get the appraisal report, there's really not a whole lot of time to solve any problems. So when you guys go out to a property and you see that it's got a septic system, the lender, I mean, of course, we're going to be looking for the on-site facility, sewer facility form addendum. Yeah, the sheet. We'll be looking for that and we would catch it there. But what if you're dealing with someone in Buffalo, New York as the lender and they've never seen that form before? What do they need to know or in order to make sure that there's not any last minute problems on the transaction? I'm always thinking on the 7 habits of highly effective people, I think it's habit number 3 or 4, win-win. I'm always thinking win-win. How do we make sure that everybody wins in this transaction? And to me, it's first things first. You gotta address everything that needs to be addressed as soon as possible. So whatever you know about the house, please know we're not going to know that the house has solar panels on it unless you guys tell us until we get the appraisal. Then it's too late. So make sure your lender is aware that there is solar panels on it and anything else that affects the transaction. If you've got a shared road, we need to know about that up front, not when we get the title commitment. If there is a well, which we don't see very often anymore, the oil water test has got to get done and it's better not to do it at the last minute. So any of those things we need to know about. The 5 different ways that you can acquire a solar system is cash, secured loan, so an actual second lien, which isn't always the case. Sometimes it's an unsecured loan, and that's the UCC filing, isn't it? It's not an installment. It's a personal loan. Yeah, okay. The UCC is the lien against the personal loan. Yep. All right. So your unsecured loan would be your UCC filings that will show up on the title commitment. And then some solar panel companies lease the equipment out. And then the last is the PPA, and that is where they are actually using, the energy companies are using the solar panels for energy in a different way. And I wanted to ask Terry about that to go into more detail. Okay, cool. All right. Any questions so far? Or how many of you guys have sold a house? And on Zoom, you guys do the show of hands. How many of you guys have sold a house, buyer or seller side, that had solar panels? I know Sarah has. How many of you guys have shown a house with solar panels? It's becoming more and more of a thing. For us, it didn't show up until we were doing a refinance. That was our first experience with solar panels. So when we were doing refinances, there were several transactions where they had solar panels. So I know we have, and Terry could even probably tell us that, you know, what's the growing trend in this area in regards to solar panels. So do you want to come talk about UCC filings? Will you? I don't want to talk this whole time. People don't like my voice all.
Am I supposed to be on the camera?
Yeah, get on the camera.
Is it going to have all my chins?
Everyone.
Where is the camera?
The camera's on my...
I'm taller than you.
Look.
Hang
on. Let's see. Stand there. Is your head cut off? Yes, your head's kind of cut off. Well, move. Push the monitor back. There you go. You're perfect.
All right.
Don't tell him that.
Well, she already said it. So a UCC is and you see UCCs on commercial transactions too, on the business personal property. So UCC, it can be filed with the Secretary of State, but typically for solars, and again, that's a better question for Terry. But UCCs are filed in the public records for a refinance, which isn't really y'all's purview. It's sticky, but we can get away with refinancing those as a valid lien. But for the sale, it's a lien. It has to be collected, even if it's on the personal property. So we're going to call it out. Do you want me to give my input on the whole thing here?
Yeah, go right
Okay.
ahead.
So
I mean, your part is really important. We can't do these transactions without you being. Okay.
so the UCC and the financing statement, it's a lien. It's got to be collected or paid, even though it's against the personal property.
And they signed a contract with agreeable terms.
They did. And so one thing that has come up on these is, and Michelle's next to me and she's going to cringe when I say it, most of these solar companies or solar financing companies, because it's not always the solar company that finances them, but they have their own vendors, right? They will allow that lien to be, or that loan to be assigned to the new buyer, but they're going to have to go through a qualification process and all that. They're going to have their credit run. And you know who right next to me is going to say, don't do anything like that. Don't mess with that. You can run the risk of trying to do it after closing, after that first lien mortgage is filed. But the other thing that she's got on her sheet here is something fairly new on our end, which we're seeing is leases. You can also assign a lease, but that's an exception on the commitment. So that's why I said that you can see these on Schedule Bs. So now I don't know the terms, and when Terry gets here, you can answer that. I don't know the terms of the lease, but now solar companies are offering leases, not just to what do you call it? Share the energy with the electrical providers and all that, but also just, I guess they could be removed based on the terms of a lease. I don't really know the full details on leases, but that's something new that we're seeing, is that now you can buy them outright, finance them, and even lease them. So anyway, and that's going to show up on a Schedule B, and those leases can also be assigned. But again, you got to qualify. The young lady to my left is probably going to say, don't do anything like that while you're in a loan process.
Well, if we know ahead of time, if you guys pull up to a property and there's solar panels and you get out your checklist and go, okay, I got this under control. I have a checklist. All I got to do is ask these questions and collect this paperwork and then review it. So you're going to want to know, how are these paid for? Do they owe any money on it? And what is the terms of the agreement? Because then in order for those solar panels to stay on the property, the buyer is going to have to agree to the terms. But guess what? They're doing a mortgage loan, and that payment matters to us too. So if you are doing, most of the time, these solar panels are $40,000 and $50,000 and $60,000. So those payments on the solar panels are usually, what we've seen, anywhere from $200 to $400. That's a lot to be factoring into someone's debt to income, which is why it's really important that we do that up front and make sure that everybody's okay with it. So we're not discouraging any of that. We just have to have the information to make sure that it's going to be fine.
And it just, for any of y'all that have ever heard me talk about surveys, this is the same thing I'll say to listing agents. And I think Michelle hit on it. You pull up to a listing appointment, you see solar panels, ask them, are they paid for? If they're not paid for, we need to market this property with buyers taking it on, they're being removed, whatever your client's perspective is on it. That's y'all's business, obviously, but be out and upfront with your clients at the listing appointment on those, because
and then put it in the MLS.
Yeah, definitely. Sarah's example that she talked about before we started was that the seller offered them to the buyer, and the buyer didn't want to pay $50,000. My mom sold her house, and they, theoretically the $40,000 they paid for those, they lost, because to make that money back, you gotta have them for 20 years. And so, but yeah, I didn't say 120.
Oh, I said.
Oh, anyway, but you got to ask those questions. And if you're a buyer's agent and you're showing a property, that'd be the first question I might ask before I even, or no later than when I'm making the offer. What's the deal with solar panels? Are they staying? Are they paid off? Do you have proof that they're paid off? And there's no title typically, but there is, just like any other loan, a paid note. So if you really want to be aggressive and say, prove that they're paid, ask for a paid note, or a receipt, whatever the solar company offers. But yeah, Michelle's exactly right. The very first thing she said, talk about it immediately. Don't wait, because it's going to be, because honestly, there's no way till we know, unless they're filed a record, and there's no way Michelle knows. And at closing, we have, just for any other, and also I liken it to the nice storage buildings, not the $1,500 ones that you can get on the side of the highway, the nice, have electrical run to them. Those things can be financed through Home Depot for $20,000, and it's very similar. it's on there and it's staying, but do they have a loan on that? So it's a very similar thing. But at closing, we ask a seller, do you have any unrecorded debts against this property? You've all heard every title company have the seller, one of the first things to sign is affidavit as debts and liens. If they say they do not have any debts and there's no UCC filed of record, we don't know. So it's on y'all, and it's not a title claim because it's personal property. You can make a claim, but it's personal property. So the claim is going to be the solar company came and ripped them off the roof. Well, sorry, you still own the real property. That's what we insure. We insure the real property. Sorry that there's damages from them removing the solar panels. So it's scary stuff.
It is scary stuff. And that's why I am so glad we're addressing it now and not 5 years from now when we're had more transactions with solar panels. Thank you, Sean. So then how does the solar panel affect the mortgage transaction? Well, if they paid cash for the solar panels, then how does that affect the transaction? I mean, what would you want to know as a buyer to a house that has solar panels? You have proof that they're paid for, but then what other questions would you have? I mean, I'd be wanting to know, do I not have any utility bills? Are you producing enough that you don't have it? Like, show me records of history of how the solar panels have affected the energy going to the home. But in that case, if they have a solar system and it's paid for free and clear, you have proof it's free and clear, the appraiser can give value for the solar panels. I could not get any of our appraisers to come today. They're scared of y'all or me. I don't know. I called all of them and they're like, no, I'm not publicly speaking. No, I'm busy. So I asked that question of them. Are you seeing any value being placed when you have a home that has a solar system on it? And the answer predominantly was, we don't have enough market data to determine whether or not there is a value add for that solar system. So what that means is it's really going to be appraiser's discretion on whether or not they feel like the solar panels have add any value.
Michelle, can you share your screen again?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I put you back.
Oh, man, Sean's messing with my stuff. Thank you for asking. Now do you see it? Okay, cool. Thanks, Ronnie. So if it is owned free and if the system is owned free and clear, get proof that it's owned free and clear. There's still items on the checklist that you're going to want to get in order to give the information that a buyer would want and need to know. Right now, we're not seeing any add back. You know, I suspect the mortgage industry will eventually give an add back for a home with solar panels that doesn't have the same utility bills as a home that does. But right now, we're not seeing any of those adjustments either. And I think it's just there's not enough data to know what the market is going to support and what buyers are looking for. In a couple of years, when more homes have solar panels, then it's likely that that will be more of what people are looking for. So that would possibly contribute to the value, but only if they're owned free and clear. And I bet you the majority of and that was one question I was going to ask Terry, is how many people pay for in cash the solar systems when they're being installed? But you're still going to want to know what the purchase agreement was, because you need the age, you need the manufacturer information and any warranties that go with it. You're still going to want to know anything that the 12-month data from the website. So there's a solar monitoring platform, and I'll ask Terry about that whenever he shows up in just a minute. That will give you some more information about the power, the energy being produced by those solar panels and measuring it all. Okay. Any questions on solar system owned free and clear? That's the easy one. Now, I have not seen actual second liens filed for solar systems yet. You've seen one? Most of them are the UCC or the personal property filings, but it is possible for the property owner to get an installment, a second lien to cover the cost. For instance, I could call Lewis at Independent Bank and say, hey, I'm gonna spend $50,000 to put solar panels on my lake house. I could get a home improvement loan for that. And that would be a second lien. First, in the terms are typically better when you have a second lien than they are with a consumer personal property loan. So it actually is better for the property owner to have the second liens, but we're just not seeing it. And maybe our banks aren't loaning the money for it yet. I don't know. That's the key.
The one I had, the contractor was the solar.
So Sean said the one installment agreement the one transaction he did, though, there was an installment agreement for the solar system. There, the contractor was filing the second lien. Yeah. Because there's money owed on the solar system through a second lien, there was no value added to the appraisal of that property because it's not owned, it's owed. So please know that you're still going to ask for the purchase agreement. Now you need to ask for the promissory note to get the terms of the contract. You also are going to want to the most recent solar loan account statement to make sure that they are current on their payments. And then the 12-month utility bills, and then you can get that 12-month data report from places like Solar Edge that gives you some information about the system itself. The solar company, like in this case, the seller would have to pay off that second lien, or you guys possibly might be able to get the second lien holder to allow your buyer to assume if the buyer is okay with the terms. If not, those solar panels will have to be paid off at closing and will show up on that loan, on the closing disclosure. Do you need any of the terms of the contract or any of that as a title company? You just get a payoff or assumption.
I didn't want to do that yet. I know it's an option.
If a buyer were to assume a second lien, you would have to have all of this documentation we're talking about, the purchase agreement, the promissory note, and all that.
We would take an exception because that assumption theoretically is not closing, but yeah, it would be a second lien. It would be an exception which would show that
So Sean's saying they would take exception to that. So your lender would have to be okay with any exceptions a title company gives. But we are going to have to approve the buyer to assume that note because now we have the buyer's got another liability. So the lender has to have a copy of that purchase agreement and the promissory note. And I have not seen an underwriter ask for proof that the payments are made current for that system from the current owner, but it just makes sense to be asking for that too, because we're fixing to own a piece of collateral that's got solar system on it, and we're going to want to know that the seller's not in default of that agreement, and the solar system is going to be taken off after it was assumed. So, just for precautionary, you guys better get a payment history. The question that Sarah had was, is a lender going to be okay with the title exception? Sean's not sure if they would, or if we. This is a second lien.
Right. Well, if it's a true second lien, absolutely. Well,
If a true second lien, you're not going to cloud my title for that.
yeah, no, if it's a true second lien, that's going to be sued.
Look, I
It's
said
going to
cloud
be-
my title.
Any second lien trying to be an exception, this is, by definition, it's a second lien, right? So
Right.
it's going to be behind the first lien. Now, UCC is personal property, right? So if you assume the personal property debt.
You're going to have to come up here if you're going to go into
I
that
don't
much
know the
detail.
answer Because I haven't even do it. There's literally never been.
Well, To answer that question
But
correctly,
Like a lease is an exception. All day, right? Any kind of lease, whether it's solar, ag, mineral, whatever.
I'll summarize just a second.
But anyway, but if you assume that lease for that personal debt, okay, then we have a requirement for a payoff.
You're going to have to come, you come up here and share. I'm not going to be able to repeat 10 minutes worth of yours.
10 minutes. Are you saying I'm long-winded?
No,
So,
this is good stuff. I mean, we gotta know.
so any lease there, come on up. So any lease is going to be a second lien. I mean, it's going to be an exception, right? An assumption of a personal debt, I've got to imagine would also be an exception on a title policy because it's a personal debt. Our requirement is to pay it off. If they're not paying it off, then we have to take exception to it. Okay, but we're still ensuring the first lien holder is superior, right? So that shouldn't be an issue. If the lender has accepted that their borrower is taking on that additional debt, right? Then I can't imagine any lender is going to care if it's an exception because if it's on Schedule C, or we require it to be paid off, it's not being paid off, so it's going to be a second lien, right? Let me talk about it in inverted terms. If you went to your bank and did a home equity loan, or excuse me, a HELOC, a second lien home equity loan, that first lien is an exception because we're not ensuring this new HELOC is going to be in first lien position. We're ensuring it's going to be in second lien position. So it's the same principle for assuming an existing debt that is not in first lien position and not being paid off. That makes sense?
Yep.
So a lender was probably going to say, we need to look into this, but I can't imagine if they've already accepted they're taking it off that they care that it's an exception on the title policy because they want to know they're in first lien position and it's not being paid off. So I can't cure it like as would appear on a Schedule C. That makes sense?
Yes, but no, in this, yeah,
I'm just kidding.
Sean,
I'm just kidding.
my bottle is full. It will hurt. But the lender has to be okay with the second lien also.
Yeah.
So our lien, the combined loan to value, if you're buying a $250,000 house and you got a $40,000 lien payoff, or we're going to assume that, then now I got $290,000, right? Well, I got to be okay with the combined loan to value being okay based on the appraised value with the buyer taking that payment on. So even if you guys provide all the data to the lender at the beginning of the transaction because you gathered all your paperwork, we're still not going to totally know if we're okay until we get an appraisal back and we know what our combined loan to value is based on the first lien and the second lien. So our new first lien and the existing second lien being assumed.
Have you had a customer assume a seller's debt when they're buying a house on
the panel? So Terry's been doing these solar systems around the United States. Yeah.
So Terry Miller just got here, the world famous Terry Miller, and he said the same thing I've said. I know it's out there, the option to assume it, but haven't seen it yet.
Michelle, your definitions here, panels don't add any value.
Right.
So when you're waiting on the appraisal, it's never going to be.
Unless we're not looking for the value of the panels at that point because it's not going to add any value, but is there any extra in there?
Yeah.
Which is likely no.
Today's market probably not.
I mean, I'm sure that the buyer is paying the top of the market plus some.
Yes.
So typically you're not going to see a gap in the appraisal so that's one scenario.
I think if you have a proposed buyer that's willing to take on the debt, they probably need the cash. That's probably going to be the short answer because unless they are putting, if they're in conventional, I'm speaking for a lender here and I shouldn't be, but if they're not doing conventional financing, there's no way it's going to get approved. I can't imagine. Right. So now you're looking at conventional buyers that are obviously have 20% down. If they're willing to say, I want those solar panels to say, I understand the seller can't pay it off at closing to make this deal happen, I'll take on that debt. But probably the likely scenario is they're going to have to just pay the cash off or negotiate, how much they're willing to give the seller for the solar panels to stay. I think that's the more likely scenario, because assuming any debt, you have to go through a qualification process. So you get the credit hit. So again, you've already talked to Michelle. She said, go for it. I think you'll be fine to at least try to assume a debt, but you're going to get a credit hit. Your DTI is going to go up, and you are taking on whatever that balance is due on there anyway, when you probably have the cash, if you're even interested in taking it on.
Yep. So Castle team, I've got loan officers on the call. When we have that scenario, if you've got a conventional loan, you put 20% down, there's money owed on solar system, we're better off shuffling the money around, using part of that 20% to pay off the solar system, less money down on the transaction, pay your MI up front, or roll it into the loan amount, so that we don't have to fight some of these. I mean, like, I'm just looking for the path of least resistance, which you can do when you have all the facts up front and you have enough time to work through those scenarios. We're in a room. So Terry's done solar all over the United States in a big way for several years. And if he's not come across this scenario, just know it's just because we don't have enough people in this area that have put the solar systems up, but it's coming. They're doing it pretty quickly. And I want you to address how that's changing, the evolution of that. And I know you've got some handouts. So let me go through this next slide, and then I'm going to have you really talk a little bit deeper on the solar systems. And then JJ, I want you to cover it from this, not really structural integrity of the roof or any of that, but once you put those on there, if you had to remove them, or what do you look for from a maintenance standpoint? And Terry could probably answer that too, because as representatives of our buyers and sellers, we need this information. All right. So another way, we've talked about that UCC filing. So I know you guys are aware what the UCC is and how it's different than a second lien, but if there isn't a second lien, and likely you won't have a second lien, likely the panels will be leased or financed through a UCC filing. This would likely be more of the scenario you guys are going to run across. So that UCC filing does show up on public record, which is why it shows up on the title commitment. There was an agreement that they signed stating how much they would pay back and the terms of the payback. So you want to get a copy of the purchase agreement, plus you want to get the agreement to repay. And I would be asking for a payment history also to make sure that they are paid current. And then Terry, the other thing, this Solar Edge on here where you can get the data from the solar monitoring, I want you to address that too.
Sure.
So we know where to go to look for that. But again, because the panels are not owned free and clear, they will not contribute to the value of the home. And then you have the scenario where you have a lease on the system. Again, you're going to want to know all of the documentation, the terms of the lease. And then I would not assume that the lease can be assumed. Same thing with the UCC filing. Don't assume that it can be assumed. They're going to have to call and get the process for assumption. And in this case, it would just be a lease transfer. They're going to just transfer the assigner or assignee. All right, and then the last, and Terry can speak to this too, the power purchase agreement, the PPA, and what that is. But again, you guys are going to just want the documentation so you fully understand and are representing your buyer correctly. You guys, I'm sure you don't feel comfortable being an expert in this area, which is why I put a panel together of people that you can reach out to later when you have questions, when you run across a listing or you're showing a property that's got panels. You've got a checklist, you got some new knowledge, but you also are going to have resources that you can reach out to, because remembering all of this when you may not come across another transaction with the solar system until next year, that's a lot to remember in a 1 year period of time if you're not practicing. And then a lot of you guys in this room and on the call also work in offices with a lot of people. So when you do hear solar system, the bells go off and you go, hey, I'm not an expert, but here's some slides and here's a checklist that you need to use. So I need y'all's help spreading the word. There's only 20 on the call and 10 in the room, and we have 700 and something real estate agents. So obviously you guys have some knowledge that y'all need to be sharing and spreading. But come on up here, Terry, and talk to us about solar, maybe even go into a little history. We've got enough time, but before we do that, I'm going to stop sharing. And Zoom, do y'all have any questions thus far? Bart, do you have any questions from a regulation or compliance standpoint? Nope. Okay. All right. Well, if y'all don't have any questions, do y'all have any questions in the room? All right, Terry, your turn.
Good morning. Appreciate you guys having me. Terry Miller from Solar One. One of the owners and the president. A little bit of background. Been in the deregulated energy market here in Texas for 19 years, and then been in solar for the last 12 years. So got a little
Can y'all hear him all right? Okay, cool.
What was the first thing that you asked me to address? So I've got the monitoring system and the PPA versus lease, maybe versus finance.
The financing piece of it.
Okay.
Because that's going to be the biggie. It's not, a lot of these buyers are going to be super excited. Hey, it's got solar. I'm so happy I won't have utility bills. And then we go, oh, but.
Mm-hmm.
So the oh, but is going to be who's going to pay for them.
So there's 3 traditional ways to implement solar. One, obviously one just being a cash purchase. So maybe 4. The other would be a lease. Something that you got to know about a lease. You've got to look at all the fine details in a lease, because if there's not a guaranteed, basically what's going on is you agree to a fixed term payment, no matter what the system, how it performs. And so if that system goes down and you don't have somebody on the other end to come fix it, you're stuck paying that payment, but you're not getting the benefit from it. So you want to take a look deep into the lease, make sure that there's a production guarantee. That's the important part. When it comes to a power purchase agreement, this is not as relevant in Texas, but there are developers coming in from California and other states where PPAs are more relevant, and they're selling these things here. A PPA is where you've got an investor or a bank-owned system, and they're selling you back the power from that system. So you're paying your utility bill plus you're buying power, usually at a little bit of a discounted rate as compared to what you're paying the utility. But that's also, and that's going to be how many kilowatt hours did the system generate for the month, and then what is the rate that they locked the client in at. So it's not as common here, but it is happening out there. And then you've got just your regular finance. A lot of these companies, there's like 3 or 4 major residential solar finance companies out there that are locking people into 20 and 25 year agreements. Generally what I'm seeing is very inflated prices on these sales, because they can spread that cost out over that long period of time. And so, and then you've got bank financing, which is usually a little bit easier. They're going out and getting a 7-year term with a local lender that they know on that equipment, and they're paying the system off much quicker.
Do you see our local banks doing that?
I've got some down in Dallas that's doing it, and there's some credit unions that we've worked with. And I'll be honest, guys, like we residential is not a focus of ours. We do larger commercial, industrial type systems, but we know residential just as well as we know commercial.
So to me, as a lender and just a finance nerd, installment agreement's the way to go, right? If you can find someone to finance it that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Better terms, fixed rate, closed in note, and reasonable terms.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why we hadn't really jumped off into residential, is because There's a lot of local banks that they're not comfortable with it yet. But the ones who are national firms out there they've got these huge. So if you're buying a $20,000 system, they're putting a 20% origination fee on top of it.
good
And then
lord.
so there's just a bunch of added fees that go into financing these projects. And if I wouldn't do it myself, I'm not going to go out and push it to clients. And so anybody that's come to us that we did do a project for, we were pushing to a local bank. Go to your local lender, somebody that you've got a relationship with. You're going to get better terms. It's just going to be best for you. But some people don't want to pay it off in 7 years, and that's generally the term that you're going to get when you go to a local bank is 7-year equipment finance term. So
What is the typical warranty on the equipment?
yeah, great question. So your modules, if they're a tier 1 good quality equipment, your modules, which are basically the motor of the system, has got a 25 to a 30-year manufacturer's warranty on it. They're gonna degrade at less than 1% on an annual basis. So even at the end of 25 years, they're still going to be producing over 80% of their original capacity. So the longevity, it's there. You could easily go 40, 50 years with these things. And
You've been doing it for 12 years and you've really seen them perform?
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
fine?
There's still there's a big utility project in California that was installed in around 1980, and it's still producing more than 80% of its original capacity. So,
Wow.
and the technology's just
Hey,
gotten
that's
better.
better than I'll be doing by then.
So the first solar system was installed in Japan in 1969 on a lighthouse. That system is still operational today with the original panels. So we really don't know what the life of these panels are, but you can look out 40, 50 years pretty easy, knowing that you've got a 25-year manufacturer's warranty.
So number one, we need to be asking for warranties,
Yes.
right? And you, just from a finance standpoint, your warranty, your note should not outlast your warranty on something this expensive. So, I mean, if you've got a warranty and there's only 15 years left, but there's still 25 years payments left on the installment agreement, that might not be a really good situation for, I mean, most people don't know how to climb on the roof and service the solar panel.
That's right. Something else that you want to look for in the documents is a lot of these lenders will give the client 18 months to pay down on that system. So when you invest in solar, there's a 26% federal tax credit that's passed to you. Okay, so if you invest in a $10,000 system, you've got a $2,600 tax credit available to you. They give you 18 months to take that money that you got back from the IRS or that you saved and pay down on that. During that 18 months, they will fix your monthly payment. But if you don't pay that 26% down on it, then the price is gonna escalate after 18 months.
Mhm.
So you wanna make sure that you're looking at the details. Did you make the payment? If that's the type of arrangement that the client made.
Good point.
Some of those PPAs also have annual escalators. So you may be paying one thing this year, but it may go up 2% year over year, or starting in year 5, it starts to go up. So that's something else that you just want
Something
to pay
else to
attention
watch for.
You say that program is where they guarantee you so much price per kilowatt hours back into the system, and you get credited for that on the PPA?
So when it comes to the PPA, basically, if I sell you a system, I'm going to tell you that system's going to produce X amount of kilowatt hours a month. It's going to vary from month to month, obviously, and you're going to agree to buy that power from me at a certain rate. So if you're paying, say, 12 cents per kilowatt hour to TXU, and I come in and say, hey, I'll sell you that power at 10 cents. Okay, so based on the production of that system is how you're going to pay me every month.
Spreading that 26% back is actually very important, because like on the listing I just had, I had a detailed sheet in the MLS that said what their monthly payment is. Well, if they signed up for that program and somebody assumed that note, that payment might go up if that amount didn't get paid.
That's right.
That's
Mhm. That could kill the deal. I could kill the deal.
Hi, Michelle, repeat what she just said.
So Sarah had come back up here. Because you can, I mean, I like Sarah just to share her whole scenario because that's the way it ended is my fear is more transactions will end the way yours did. And that's not clever.
So I just recently had a listing where it has solar panels and they owe about $50,000 on the panels. So when I went to the listing, we talked about that. Of course, the seller thinks they're great, and I can, that 50,000 can roll into the note. Try to explain to them that is not going to be added to the appraisal more than likely. But one of the things on my listing is I made out a detailed page that I attached to the MLS that had like what their monthly payments are, who the companies are, who the finance company is. But as far as what Terry was just saying about that 26% where that they can,
The tax.
Yeah, basically.
basically it's,
The lender allows them usually 12 to 18 months to pay that 26% of the gross cost of the system back to them to keep their payment down to where it currently is.
so the amount that I had on that sheet was their payment. But if they didn't end up paying that amount, that 26%, that payment obviously is going to change. So that would be important information to me as a buyer's agent that I would want to know. But as a seller's agent, I put that payment out there. I didn't realize that was even a possibility. So that payment could actually go up. So that was my
And
my
what did
statement.
Joel end up doing on that transaction?
That transaction, after it was on the market for a couple of weeks, and it was in Crossroads, which is actually kind of weird in these times, a long time to be on the market in that area. And I finally convinced them that the solar panels, not everybody can assume a $50,000 loan or want to assume a $50,000 loan.
Or
So-
can because of that.
Right, debt to income. And I tried to explain all this to them. So finally, we ended up getting an offer on it, but then the buyer's agent, they were having a hard time getting information from the solar panel company and the lender. So they eventually terminated. And then in all of that, the seller finally decided just to pay the solar panels off and just take them with them. The seller wanted to pay the solar panels off at closing, which would be great. Seems like a perfect scenario, but the solar panel company would not allow them to remove the panels until they were paid off. So my statement to them was, we're going to have a hard time finding a buyer that will agree to the solar panels being paid off at closing and then send out a contractor after closing to remove those panels. What damage is it going to do to the roof? That buyer's going to, I just can't imagine a buyer allowing, agreeing to that. So finally they came up with the money, they paid the loan off, recently had them removed. It was $5,000 to have them removed. Well, that included removing them from the house and then reinstalling them at the new house, which, by the way, they're not going to put them on the roof. The next house, they're going to figure out a different way. But so that was just a challenge that we had to get past, is paying those off and getting them removed, having the roof repaired. We had a professional roofing company come out, or they did, and repair the roof, came along with a warranty, things like that. So it's been very interesting and
So
trying to.
Terry brought up a good point.
To the deal, right?
No. Oh, and my other thing I was going to mention is in the MLS, I have in there that the buyer can either assume them or the seller will remove them. Whenever I go in to add that as a sold property, we as listing agents need to make sure we go back into our description and put on there that the seller actually removed them and they did not convey with the property, because appraisers, they need that information.
They need the data.
Yes.
They would want to know. for
Yes.
sure.
Yes.
Now, Terry brought up a point. You can't, these panels are registered, I'm sure, through some kind of national database and you can't just pull them off and put them somewhere else without getting some kind of transfer?
Yeah, so utility policy here in North Texas with Encore, with GCEC, CoServe down in the Metroplex, you can on it install used equipment. So I would find it interesting if that client was able to actually get that equipment reinstalled on a new property and interconnected. Now, if they moved, yeah, even if you're out in the county in GCEC,
GCEC.
they
has
may or
trouble
may
with
not,
that.
yeah, they may or may not.
What's the
figure it
reason for that? What would be, why would used panels not be okay to be installed?
That's a great question. Generally, what they're looking for is something that's been recertified as safe. So,
Because of the amount of power that goes through
well,
them and
not
the-
just
and the-
because it's just electrical code,
Yeah.
NEC code.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure it's the solar panel company that sold them those solar panels that came in.
Remove them.
He's saying where.
Where
Yeah.
they're being installed, they may have a trouble.
Even if it's not on the roof, anywhere on another service areas.
Yeah, it's just tying used equipment into their electrical grid. So
There's another thing to think about too. They moved that product to another house. That particular house, there was a hailstorm that came through. Okay, it may not have been enough damage, but then the integrity of that panel is now jeopardized. You move it to a new house, when you new build, they're assuming that it's new, but it's actually been on another house for 10+ years and it took some other damage. So it's not.
Use panels and put them on a shop or something like that. Are they, pun intended, off the grid?
so you have to
With
have
a
a battery
battery?
bank
With a battery?
to be off grid.
So
In
that
most
may be an
cases,
option to do this, got a battery and.
it's possible. Yeah.
So all these panels are feeding back into the grid currently. There is no, we're off the grid, other than what you just said about batteries. We're not running our house off of the panels on our property. It's all going back into the system and we're benefiting through a discount on the amount that we're using because they're buying it back and reselling and that sort of stuff. So maybe the common
Okay.
conception is.
Let me bring
that-
some clarity to that.
Yeah.
So actually,
Repeat his question, so.
yeah, so what he's asking is when the system is producing power, is it feeding into the home, or I think made the assumption that it's actually all going back onto the grid and they're giving some type of credit. What's really going on is, as the system's producing power, the home is using that power first before it takes power from the grid. So if you're in an overproduction situation, it will essentially roll the meter backwards. And then when you're in a situation where the system's not producing, but your home's still consuming, it'll net the meter forward. That works in GCEC service territory. That does not work in the Encore service territory. So something that I'm seeing it in the market, people are getting their rear ends handed to them because they're getting sold a bill of goods. A solar company will come in and not understand local policy. They'll identify that Sean's using 24,000 kilowatt hours a year. And so they'll sell them a system that produces 24,000. What they don't probably understand in a lot of cases, they don't know any better, is that there's not a net metering policy in the Encore service territory. So any overproduction, any type of situation where you're overproducing, it's going back on the grid. Now, there are some utility companies that will give you a wholesale credit on your bill. So TXU, Green Mountain, some of these guys. But when you're paying 12 or 14 cents to be on a solar program and they're only giving you credit for, 6 to 8 cents, that doesn't
Still not
make
net.
sense. Yeah. If you're in GCEC, total different story. You can produce 100% of your power and pay an $18 service fee to stay connected to the grid.
Now, what if someone has the system and battery for storage?
Yeah. Total
Then are
different
they
story.
off, then it's technically off the grid?
Well, no, you're still connected to the grid as a kind of a secondary, but what's going on is your overproduction is charging up the batteries at night when the system's no longer producing, but you're consuming power, the batteries discharge into the home. And so battery systems, that's a whole different story. Those are good, but it's really going to extend that return on investment. Right now, just for you guys' knowledge, like if you're to go pay cash for a system, you're looking at a 7-8 year return on investment, and whether you're in GCEC or Encore. So when you start implementing batteries, it doesn't necessarily get the ITC, the 26% tax credit. It'll extend that, return out to 12 to 15 years, depending on what you're paying.
So the
So
base default system, overage isn't going back into the grid, it's just a credit.
well, it's going back in the grid, but you have to be on a program with your energy provider that allows that. Yeah. And so common misconception, and it used to be this way. They used to offer a 1-to-1 credit. They did it for about 5 years. I was very hesitant at first because I was like, hey, you lock in this contract for 3 years and it's all great, but who's to say that after 3 years, they're no longer going to, are they going to continue that? After 5 years, I got more comfortable with it. And I told people, hey, they've been doing it for 5 years, but about 18 months ago, every provider quit doing it. So now what they're doing is your overproduction. They're giving you a retail credit as opposed to a wholesale credit. And so it's not 1-to-1. You have to pay your encore delivery fees on all that power that you're getting from the grid, and you're getting a smaller portion on the credit
So
on
it
your
doesn't
energy
matter who
supply.
your retail provider is, if you're in the encore service area, it doesn't matter whether you're Reliant, Green,
Mountain.
whoever.
It goes
They
by
can't
Encore
give
rules.
you
Yeah.
a special, rebate or any special because they are using the Encore infrastructure to
That's
provide
right.
you the
That's right.
retail service.
They could give it to you, but they quit doing it. I guess they were losing money doing it. So
When you sell the system, do you recur? What's the cost difference of with or without a battery? Do you push battery? Just like what are your thoughts?
well, to be honest, like I said, we really don't service the residential market. Now we've got clients or friends and family that's called us, and we do a handful of deals every year. So we know the market inside and out, but a lot of people call me for a second opinion because they've gotten somebody that's come to their home or whatever. And 9 times out of 10, if they're not getting a battery system because I want a battery system and I'm planning on being there for the next 20 years. I let them know you need to go to, there's a website, and you guys may want to make note of this, but it's a smartmetertexas.com. A client can go to smartmetertexas.com. You need a copy of your bill with you whenever you do this. You can set up an account there and actually pull down your 15-minute interval data from your meter from that particular home. Really there needs to be an analysis done with that 15-minute interval data. So when they size up a system, that they're sizing it up to where they're not putting that client into a situation where they're overproducing. And that's going to be for the Encore service territory only.
Which is basically most of our area. We're either GCEC or Encore, aren't we?
That's right. Yeah. There's a little bit of Texas, New Mexico, I think in White over in the Trenton area, but, and then, CoServe down in West McKinney and Frisco.
So if I understand it correctly, you would suggest just having a system geared up for your actual usage, closer to your actual usage than either purposely buying more to store the battery or being oversold and having a battery. You think it's smarter just buying what you need?
That's right. Yeah. Unless you're just planning on being there for a long time. If you found your forever home and this is where you're going to be at for 15, 20 plus years, I say do it.
And if your mother-in-law lives next door, would you say you'll be there for 20 years?
If your mother-in-law lives next door, then
Sorry.
yeah.
That was a question for one person in the room. Sorry.
So did I understand you correctly?
We have,
Properly, you're saying that you can actually offset the upfront cost of this system in energy savings in roughly 7 years?
7 to 8 years. If you pay cash for it, you go out and finance it. It's a total different story because where most people, if you're paying cash, they'll sell a project at about $2.60 a watt up to $3 per watt. And when you run those economics, that's where you're going to fall in that 7 to 9 year range. But what I'm seeing is these companies that are coming in and selling these leases or these long-term finance options, they're selling at $3.50 a watt, $4 a watt, spreading that cost out over 30 years. So you're not even going to, it's just
Doesn't make
completely
financial
different.
sense. So if you've got a buyer looking at that property, so really if you show up, you pull up and you see solar panels, you got a checklist, You need to go through the checklist and make sure you ask all the right questions. But, and you weren't here when I was showing all of the slides, I don't think. But what questions should we be asking?
Yep. So
We
I
talked
mean-
about making sure the installment agreement, we know about the financial part of it, but from a solar panel part, what questions do we need to be asking? Because we may need to expand our checklist based on what you say.
So we've touched on some of the stuff on page 1 of this document. Obviously identifying, is it a finance? Is it a lease? Is it a PPA? But you got to look and see, obviously what's a monthly payment? Is there an escalation clause? How many more months are left on the terms? Or how many, what's the term that's left? You wind up going to need to get the contact information for the finance company to transfer to the new owner. Is there a transfer fee? Is there an early buyout option? So some of these guys are financing these things, and if you pay it off early, then they penalize you for it. Is there a UCC filing? Most cases, I think it's going to be a yes.
Yes, yeah.
So then you're getting down into what is the size of the system? How many kilowatt hours a year does it produce? Somebody else said it earlier, request the last 12 months of the bills, you're gonna have to put the two together. What are they paying monthly to the utility? In addition to what they're paying to the finance company. As for a copy of the lease agreement and any addendums that were added to that agreement. So they could provide you with the original lease agreement, but if there was ever an addendum that changed the terms, then you definitely want to identify those. And then you want to identify what type of equipment was used. So whenever they were sold this system, there should have been a closeout document or binder that has all the information on what type of modules were used, what type of inverter and racking system. It has all the warranty information on it. You want to have that. While we're touching on inverters, Michelle.
And we'll address, Victoria, your question on the solar trees in just a minute.
Michelle brought up the fact that you talked about Solar Edge and being able to monitor the system. Solar Edge is an inverter manufacturer. So they're one of the 10 that are out there. Each one of these inverter manufacturers, your system will come with a monitoring system. So you can log in from your phone or your laptop and see what that system's produced over its life, over the course of a month or a week, what it's producing real time. So it's important to look at that. You want to find out, has the system had any issues? Okay. If so, what were they? You want to find out, did the company who installed the system originally, did they come out and fix it, or did you have to call a third party? So generally, when they sell you a system, they should come with a 5 to 10 year workmanship warranty from the company who installed it. We're hearing more and more about companies that sold a system and then now a client can't get a hold of them to come fix an issue. So we get
So
calls
where
like that.
is our resource? Are you our resource? I know you don't do much residential, but who do we call when we have these questions?
I've got a handful of residential guys out there that I refer out.
Okay.
We just don't do this.
For those of you guys on the call, make sure that you've got Terry's handouts and everybody's contact information.
I'll
You guys in
email
the
this
room are
over
the
to you
same.
in a PDF.
Cool.
Is this part of the sale typically, the warranty? In other words, if you have problems, they come out?
It is.
and
Yeah, there should be. Now, if it's a
Repeat
equipment
the
issue,
question. Norman was asking whether or not the warranty is part of the upfront sale process.
it definitely is a part of it. If you're buying a piece of equipment and you don't really know much about it, then you want to have a workmanship warranty. You want to know that your equipment has a good manufacturer's warranty on it. So that's definitely a part of the sale. So really, you want to make sure that whoever's selling it to you or whatever company installed the system, that they're somewhat local. Because if you have a problem and they're down in San Antonio,
You don't have power in your house, your refrigerator and your freezer is going to start melting.
well, that's not true. Unless you're off grid, but yeah, I mean, you're always hooked up to the grid. And so, but you're not getting the benefit of this system that you paid, tens of thousands of dollars for. So
So do those warranties typically?
So your insurance policy covers hail.
Okay, so that's a really good question. Great segue. Blaine, let's talk about solar insurance while we're talking about warranty and the systems itself, but you gotta come up here.
And is Victoria's question, are you referring to the insurance? I don't know if that's what you're asking, Victoria. Can you chat there or talk?
I was actually asking about, and you see this more on commercial buildings than you do on residential, but have y'all ever seen those trees that they're on the property, but they're basically poles that have solar panels attached to them and then they feed to the building?
Yeah, like Landmark Bank.
Yeah, so I was just wondering how those are treated, like on the contract number one, because they're not actually an attached fixture and et cetera, if y'all have ever come across that.
Yeah.
Well, but they are,
Disclose them on a T47.
So they will need to be disclosed on the T47 if that is the case. Like my dad, for example, my parents live in the hill country, and my dad built a carport that he's using for tractor storage that he put all of his solar panels on, and then he has battery storage. Thank goodness, because when the ice storm came, that's what kept them warm for a couple days anyway. After that, they froze.
Is he in Austin?
Yeah,
Is it Austin
outside of
now?
Austin. Yeah. So that still is going to show up on the title commitment if they financed it using UCC or a second lien. So it'll be addressed there. It will, and it is a permanent fixture that would.
I would consider like a monument. So that needs to be memorialized in the survey if it stayed.
Yeah. So it's got to be on the survey. It will show up on the title if it was financed. Your terms still need to be looked into. And I don't really think now from an insurance standpoint, I don't know how that changes the coverage. And Christy has something to add. So Blaine will address that in just a few minutes. But Christy. That is a really good.
Yeah.
That's
so-
a really good point. So
If-
Christy's question was who determines before the panels are installed? Number one, how heavy are they? But before they're installed, who is determining that the home can handle the extra weight where they're being installed?
Yeah, so whenever you turn in a permit down at the city to get a system installed, whoever's installing it or pulling the permit should provide electrical engineering and structural. So there should have been an analysis done from the people who are selling the system. So, yeah, that's right.
And
Yeah,
the
in the
county-
county, it's a different story. Now these systems, these systems they're 3.5 pounds a square foot, so they're not just like. They're not super heavy. These modules are going to be 6 foot by 3 foot by 6 foot or 3 foot by 5.5 on those panels. Yep. So they're drilling into the rafters.
That's it. They're not supporting them on the inside of the roof. They don't need to be.
They don't need to be.
So they are drilled into the rafters of the roof. So
And I would
that's
say that
the attachment point
it is.
only, and that's it. Supposed so, and JJ brought up a good point too. They're supposed to be installed on the rafters of the roof, but that doesn't mean that they necessarily were. That's why it's important if you're gonna, when you call your inspector, that you ask the questions, are you comfortable checking out the solar panel system or the solar system on the home and making sure that it was, it's attached well, it didn't compromise the structural or integrity of the home, and you don't have any gaps that would create any wood rot issues, because that would be a problem as well. And are they, from an insurance standpoint, we're going to address that as well. So I want both of you guys to address those questions in just a few minutes. But Blaine, come talk to us from an insurance standpoint. What do we need to know?
So what you need to know is insurance companies are making adjustments on the fly year after year to catch up with solar panels and the insurability and how they're insured. It's kind of like an underwriting situation might be with a DTI or debt to income. Some companies just don't want solar panels because they don't know how to charge for them, is kind of the best way of summarizing it. And that's a big thing when you're getting, on the buyer side, when you're getting insurance, making sure the solar panels are covered and how they're covered and if they're covered. And the biggest thing is, will the company take it? So there's a lot that goes into it. Believe it or not, it's not just like a home. Hey, everybody's going to insure it. There's just a lot to it, because there's a lot of carriers that I have that if they say solar panels, they're like, hey, I'm out. Or they'll say, hey, we'll accept the solar panels, but if it's a hail or a wind claim, we're not going to cover those. But if the house burns down, we will cover them. And then there's some carriers that'll cover them kind of no matter what. One big thing that I kind of tell people is ask questions, ask questions, ask questions. And even for me, I've done plenty of insurance policies that have solar panels. The first thing that I do is I call the carrier directly, because things change often. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but they're trying to keep up with what's going on. It's kind of the same things with Airbnbs. Insurance companies don't know how to charge for them so much. So a lot of people just say no until there's enough market data to account for it. There's two big things that I talk about with the client, or I guess with the insurance value. So if a solar panel costs $40,000, and I have no idea, but if a system costs $40,000 and the home without solar panels needs to be insured for $250,000, now they need to insure that property with the solar panels for $290,000. I think I did quick good math there.
You did.
But so that does add to the insurance cost. So that's kind of the thing there, is you add it to the replacement cost value of that home. If it's a separate structure, so say it's like the tree kind of thing, that's why I was asking that question. So if it's on the property but not attached to the home, you want to make sure you include in other structure coverage for the value of the solar panels. So if it's one that's mounted on the ground, a set from the house, typically 10% of the structure. So going back to the 250,000 value, typically only 25,000 would be done on a policy standard. So to cover the solar panels on a 40,000, you'd actually need to increase that value to at least 40,000, not just 25,000, because then if something happens and it's all gone, then they're only getting 25,000 to replace a $40,000 value. And then they're underinsured, and just all kinds of stuff goes bad real fast with that.
Could they increase their personal coverage? Is that not true?
So it's not personal property. It's either going to be on your home value or on your other structures, because we don't consider it, I guess with y'all, with being a personal property, we consider it an other structure, just like a fence or a shed might be.
Being on the roof, you can't just say, I think my contents are worth 100,000, but I have these solar panels, so I'd like to insure them.
But you're saying personal property?
Yeah. Like
So- right, so contents. Right. So yeah, it's always going to be a part of your structure. So it's not going to be with like furniture, clothing, electronics, which is the contents. Right.
Which would only complain on total loss, not hail anyway. So
Right. And we see quite a bit where, you get a hailstorm and the roof is going to be replaced, but the panels don't have to be. They're very resilient to hail, up to about a billiards ball size.
Wow.
So they're not going to break unless you hit it with a golf ball, really
But a
hard.
roofer is not the one that needs to take them off and reinstall, correct?
That's right. So generally what happens, a roofing company is going to contact, they need to be contacting who originally installed it to pull it off and then set it back on. But we do see that a lot.
Claim with a solar panel.
Yeah.
Or I wonder how many people just replace around it and just leave
Well,
underneath.
They should, because,
I
I
mean,
guess
'cause
in
it didn't
between the
get
panels
damaged.
could
Yeah.
get damaged, but
Yeah.
in a lot of cases, the modules are going to protect the roof.
Yeah. And a claim that I haven't had a client have that issue yet as far as needing a new roof, but I have had clients that bought properties that had solar panels. And this was in Austin, and the roof was like 25 years old, which nobody will insure a roof that's, well, I can't say nobody, almost nobody will insure a roof that's 25 years old. But the client, they had to take it off, put a new roof and put it back on there. And then I've asked questions to countless carriers kind of preparing for this question. Almost nobody knows or won't give a definite answer.
What we've
So-
experienced is about $250 to $275 per module is what insurance companies are paying.
To replace.
So remove and replace.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I did get somebody on the phone today. Just another person I called this morning, that they said that they will pay for the uninstall and reinstall as a part of, just like if a home was demolished, there's a debris removal that's on a policy, because you have to remove before you can put back. And so that's kind of the same thing that's kind of built into. And that's also why with solar panels, if it is $40,000, that's the install cost. That's not just material. And I say, correct me if I'm wrong there, but that was $40,000 to install. So that's why you need to insure them for $40,000, because you're not just going to rebuy it and just have it. You have to actually get it reinstalled. So you're insuring it for that amount, not just the product cost.
Yeah, the installation shouldn't cost the 40. That would be the equipment and everything. So
Right.
the
Right,
wiring
yeah.
would still be good. The module would still be good.
For
So-
both of y'all, Tesla shingles, have they come up yet?
Tesla shingles, huh?
So the only thing I'll say with Tesla
Terry's-
shingles, when I
Terry's
was
not
looking
touching
at
it.
this, a lot of carriers specifically say we'll accept solar panels. Tesla shingles, no, and it's very specific. So it's
No roof coverage.
Tesla shingles are going to be for your people who they're priced out of this world. So it's
So we're
cost-
likely not gonna see that around here. Yeah. So, you know, just
I will not
like,
be investing in
I just
that.
want to bring up the fact that communication is key. So, you know, whenever you're working with something unusual, you got to be able to communicate with people. Why I think that it is so important that we're having this conversation. You guys know where to go to ask questions. But what I love about what Blaine, the service level that Blaine provides clients is he goes line by line by line by line and explains the coverage and the cost of the coverage and why you would want it and why you might not need it. And it's really important, you guys, when people are buying houses, insurance matters. And having a conversation, we've got amazing, just like we have great lenders in this area, we have great insurance agents. Use local and have conversations and make sure your buyers get educated on what they're paying for. That part's really important. And I appreciate the amount of time you take with people explaining what they're paying for and how, if they needed you, the claim would be processed and taken care of. Christy has a question and then I'll answer yours.
So I'm seeing more insurance companies maybe not paying for a replacement roof, only a repair. So how is that going to impact, if you have part of the roof replaced, you have these shingles that are covered by these solar panels, so they're not doing the perfect.
So Christy said that she's seen some insurance policies excluding roof replacement and only providing coverage for roof repair. So her question to Blaine was, how does that affect the coverage in the event that you have a claim and you've got part of the roof has got solar panel on it, the other part needs to be repaired, really probably replaced, but they don't have the coverage, so now they got to repair it.
So I know you're not trying to ask a loaded question, but there's a whole lot that goes into the profitability for insurance companies and how they offer coverage. And I'm a client just as much as I am an agent. So I try to speak that way. They're going to make their money. So what carriers are doing is they're adjusting year after year after year so they can keep their profits. What I'm seeing, because I have 85 carriers, and this is not against the shots at any individual company, but everybody's kind of doing that. So they're requiring, you're used to what you hear a replacement cost policy. So if a roof costs $12,000, you get $12,000 minus your deductible, and that's taken care of. A lot of companies are now going, okay, cool, we'll give you replacement costs if the house burns down, but if it's just a roof situation, we're only going to pay what they call actual cash value. So if it's a 10-year-old roof, even though it's a $12,000 roof, to replace it, they're going to give you $6,000 minus your deductible. So then you're getting $4,000. And a lot of clients have no idea that that's what they got. They just, oh, you have coverage for your roof is what they hear. It's also things where they're doing 2% deductibles and they're going up and up and up on deductible options. And clients don't know what that really means when it comes to that. But
And the lender cares about that. We have a requirement on deductibles, and I don't have operations on the call, but I thought we were capped at 2%. And the reason is because people owe us money for this house. And if there's a claim, so there's damage to the house and there's claim to our collateral, we want them to be able to afford to fix it. And so if you have a 4% deductible, and that is typically calculated 4% of the insured amount, that's a lot of money that now the homeowner would have to come up with in order to make the repairs necessary to the property. We're not okay with that because it could cause an affordability issue. So you always, that's another thing that's super important, is that there's good communication between your buyer and the insurance company and the lender, because we all have to agree to the terms.
Blaine, if the panels are on the structure itself and they have coverage and whatever that amount is, and a claim does need to be filed because there is damage to those panels, or modules as you call them, how is that claim filed? Is it a roof claim? Is it a panel? In other words, is it your 2% or 1% roof deductible? Is it a separate?
So it's whatever your wind and hail deductible.
Did y'all hear his question? Okay, Ellen's saying yes. Good job,
So it
Norman.
depends on what the wind or hail deductible is. That's how it's going to be filed, because that's what caused the damage. Is just the best way of saying it. So whatever the cause of the damage is, how it's filed, regardless of what damages come from it. Yeah, obviously, if it's a 2% deductible or whatever, but they don't have wind and hail and all that kind of stuff, kind of falls into play depending on the policy. But something else I was kind of meaning to add: certain carriers are now, to go to their profitability, you could have a storm come in from the north, destroy the north side of the roof, but the south side is totally fine. So what companies are doing is they have matching inclusions or exclusions or endorsements, so that if a roof wasn't damaged on one side and it's still perfect, it's not covered, but then they'll cover the side that was damaged, because that's what insurance for, is to fix the damaged stuff. So that's what a lot of companies are doing now, is they're like leaning towards, hey, we'll give you a $20,000 endorsement for siding and roof matching, is what they call it, so that they can say, hey, we're not going to cover the side of the roof that's not damaged. Now, that's a very new thing. The majority of companies aren't doing that. They're just saying, if they're doing the roof, they're doing the roof, because then there's all these seams and all that kind of other stuff that they have to do.
So then my question is, I'm sitting there going, okay, how do you disclose that on the seller's disclosure? Half of my roof was replaced in, the other half. Yeah, how old is the roof? And
Well, how does an insurance company feel about when y'all ask us, how old's the roof? We say half of it is 2 years old. Half of
yeah,
it is 10
yeah,
years
and
old.
your
What do
seller.
you want us to tell you?
Right. Well,
Yeah,
that's what
It might
it's-
come back and bite you.
Well, that's
Yeah.
one of the things that it hasn't come up yet, where I've literally had somebody say, actually, it was a half and half, and just haven't come across it. But I know it's the reality of it can happen.
Yeah, I've got a roofing company that subleases an office, and that does happen.
Yeah.
Because I'm hearing.
They're
about it.
constantly having to try to get the roof covered, and people are like, what? You're only gonna do half my roof? Yeah.
But, and I guess to kind of wrap a bow on that, I've been told different thing by different people. Some are going to take it off. Some are, if it's fine, if the solar panels are fine and the roof under it is fine, they're going to replace around it. Because I think maybe to your point, if you pull them off and then put them back on, trying to hit the studs and all that stuff, and the install and getting them where it's a weather tight again, pulling off and putting on, that can cause more issues.
3 layers of shingles.
I love 3 layers of shingles. That's how you call somebody else. No, just kidding. I'll figure it out. But it's
Never leak.
wood shake on top of this, on top of metal.
The second, the
Three
first
layers.
layer are absorbing the water.
3 layers never leak.
But yeah, insurance, if there's solar panels, there's a lot of, and make sure you ask a lot of questions on your buyer side. It's not really so much the seller, but it is the buyer. You want to make sure that they know what they're getting, what they do and don't have coverage for, because it's not a generic everything across the board, whether it's roof or solar panels. There's a ton to it.
It sounds to me like we need to do a whole lot more due diligence during the option period if we have a buyer.
Absolutely. I think if you are contracted on a piece of property, or you're writing a contract and it's got solar panel, please allow yourself enough time in the option period to do all your research. Because,
So that's a question I have to, I'm sorry, I'm not a realtor.
but
You said ask for statements. So like, ask for your TXU statement. Are there monthly statements the solar company they should be cross-checking with too, or annual
So,
statements?
yeah, so looking at the utility bill is one, but then identifying that they've actually been making their payments on the finance or the lease. I think
I'm
Michelle
talking
brought that
about-
up.
I'm talking about productivity statements.
Yes,
Are there
absolutely.
productivity statements?
yeah,
Yeah, so
how do we go to pull a report that shows that, yes, they have these solar panels, but they're still having to pay for energy because it's not producing enough?
Yeah, like I get it, like my TXU bill is $12, clearly it's working, but is there a productivity statement that says that they're not wasting, they overpaid because they did over?
Great question. So every client, every homeowner that's got solar should have a login to a monitoring system that you can log in, like I said, from your phone or computer. When you log into your monitoring system, you can see what that system's producing on a monthly basis. You can take that production along with the utility bill and analyze, am I getting credit for 100% of the production, or am I getting partial credit because I don't have a supplier that's giving me a one-to-one credit or
I
maybe.
bought a panel that provides 20,000 kilowatts, but I'm only using 10,000.
Exactly. And that is happening.
But as a proposed buyer, like,
Yep.
is this something I need to be factoring in? Like, because
Absolutely.
not only am I taking on this, okay, and then my second question related to that too, sorry guys, is does that buyer, okay, they're buying the house, they're moving forward. Do they contact the solar company so they get that login and or do they have to contact the Encore GCEC as well?
No, I think what you would have your seller change username and password to where they were comfortable sharing that data for a certain period of time. And that way the client can
Monitor.
evaluate
So the seller doesn't notify the solar company.
No, it's access for the homeowner.
And every seller uses electricity differently.
That's right.
Yeah.
Mine, they do crypto mining, so they're using tons.
Oh, yeah, around the clock.
They're using tons.
Yeah.
So their bill was still.
You brought up a great point there. So if you've got a seller who is mom stays at home and runs a daycare out of the home, they're using a lot of power during the day. So they're consuming the power that's being produced by the system. You got a buyer that's moving in, mom and dad are both off at work and everything's shut off during the day. You're going to have different consumption habits. And so if you're in Encore and you're in an overproduction type situation compared to the previous homeowner. So it's.
But did you not say that since Encore is not
Have a net metering policy.
a reverse thing, you're always gonna get the TDU charges on your bill for the total consumption, even if you're.
No, so only on the power that you're not consuming real time. So
Okay.
the system is set up to produce power and for the home to consume it first.
Okay.
Anything that
So the
is,
TDU charges will be reflected only of the overage.
that's
that
correct.
You're not offset.
Yes, sir.
That's
Everybody get that.
Yeah, I think so. Terry, I'm gonna put you on the spot. I'm good at that. Thank you for trusting me. Very good at that.
Say trusted Jesus here.
Well, no,
Do I have an option?
everybody that's here knows I do that occasionally. Anyway, do you have someone on your staff that when we had one of these transactions, we could just pay a fee to, and you give us a checklist, we gather up the information, you guys kind of put together a summary of what we're looking at?
Mhm.
Do you have someone that would do that service for us? Oh,
Yes,
he's
I
gonna-
do.
okay,
We could do it
Think
in-house.
on that and see if that is a resource that you could be for us. And, I know that a buyer would be willing to pay a fee, and a real estate agent, I can't imagine would prefer an expert look over all of this stuff than us trying to figure out whether or not we're reading it correctly.
Sure.
Because we don't come across it that often. It may be another 6 months to a year before you guys run across the scenario and you'll go, holy crap, I know I took that class. I don't remember anything about this part of it.
And besides that, it's gonna change.
It's gonna change,
Make
right?
sure you fill out your GTAR affiliate
And
membership application.
Yeah.
He doesn't get it.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. Well, that sounds to me like we need solar panel consultants.
Yes, I think so too, because this is like, I feel like I understand, but if I had a situation right now, I don't know that I would feel confident enough to be leading or even asking the right questions. Yeah. Exactly.
So for the third leg of this stool, let's assume we have panels and they're paid for. We've done our due diligence. We've got our insurance lined up. What does JJ do when he
Yep.
goes to
I knew that was
inspection
coming.
Almost
Come on.
made it.
of the
Hold on.
house that has solar panels? What are you looking,
25 minutes left, man. Thanks.
what are you looking at? What do you
You gotta
check
You gotta
in?
stand up and get up
What,
here.
what does your licensure require
Show off
you
the
to
gun show.
do
Let's go.
when we're moving forward?
So as a home inspector, as you guys know, there's certain components that we don't have to inspect. They're considered, ancillary services. They're additional. For example, septic system, that's additional. So additional charges for that. From my company, I don't charge additional for solar systems. If I go in a house and I go up on the roof and I see solar panels, there's no additional charge. Okay. I'm not a contractor, I'm not licensed, but I am going to, just like anything else, if I see anything wrong, I'm going to document it. I actually put a warning in my report saying FYI solar panels are installed, unable to thoroughly inspect the shingles underneath the panels. Okay. But when I'm in an attic, and I have seen this, I have seen decking damage. And you can remember, we either have OSB or you have plywood. Okay. And they should catch the rafters. And to Chrissy's point, the older houses, you have 2x4 rafters. You have older houses, older 2x4 rafters. That's necessarily, they don't have purlins and it's helping support the weight. So you've already got a bowing roof. Okay. Newer houses, 2x6 and some wood truss framing, which in my opinion is better. Okay. So that all plays a factor. My question to you would be that warranty installation part, how long does that, you said it was 25-year warranty for the product itself.
Mhm.
How long does that cover the actual installation as far as damage?
Yeah, generally a workmanship warranty is going to be 5 years.
So he said a workman warranty is 5 years. Okay.
But generally, if anything's going to happen because of that system being on a roof, it's going to happen in the first 5 years. It should happen in the first 12 months.
Here's the other thing that we have not even talked about yet. What if I go in an attic and I see this, even without solar panels? What if it's foam insulated?
Yeah.
It's sealed up. I can't see it.
Yeah.
So you won't know until further down the line. You start seeing, worst case scenario, God forbid, you start seeing some sagging because the decking is rotted or something. Let's say if it's foam insulated and they're estimating, okay, 16-inch off center rafters, and they're trying to hit them. What if they miss it and they damage it?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
I misspoke on that. They're actually going into the decking in a lot of cases.
Okay.
Hitting the rafters.
Yeah,
But
so rafters is ideal, but I've seen in some spots
solar
where
companies, they don't know what the condition of that decking is.
no, they
so-
don't.
Well,
And
they
I've
usually
gone in
don't- well,
there.
I guess they go into the
And
attic because they gotta.
You would hope.
They should, but
You would hope, but I have seen, I was actually trying to look last night on some of my old reports. I didn't put them, but I have taken some pictures where there's been some damaged decking. Because of, see like a bolt come through and all of a sudden you just see, I'm like, oh, and snapping pictures of it.
Impossible to get every bolt and every rafter.
No.
No matter what, the panels aren't designed exactly.
yeah, the racking system.
Right. Right. So that's the other thing too you have to look at. But again, there's a difference between, as we all know, securing something to multi-layered plywood compared to OSB. OSB is weak. Okay. It's weaker compared to plywood. So, that's something that you've got to, I would look at and see, like I said, I'm going to document anything that I see and take pictures of, put in a report. And back to what Christy was saying, as far as get that report to you in a timely manner so you can address that in your option period. So you can ask these questions so you can see, if the workmanship warranty, if they have to come back out and do that, their response time, because as you guys know, it's going to push everything back if they can't get up in your option period and what have you. So, okay.
Do you only inspect the installation of the panels, or if you're willing, do you also inspect the electrical wiring?
Only visual. I do not do any testing of the system. I will, just like with any component in a house, as far as electrical, HVAC technician, HVAC component, what have you. An electrical panel, I'm pulling the cover off. I'm inspecting, connections, verify grounding, any damage in the panel that I see, any improper wiring, exactly, wire size, anything that's anything like that. So if I see anything that's overheating, and what I do is, I do a thermal imaging scan. I charge extra for the entire house, but I still scan the panel box with my thermal camera because that panel box is very crucial. If I've got any overheated breakers, I'm still documenting the report. So if I see anything's overheating and that's out of the realm, snap picture, document it. It's a major finding. Like, we need to get this checked out prior to closing.
So whenever we do inspections on our commercial projects on an annual basis, that's what you use is the thermal scanner on the underneath the modules. You're looking for heat.
Hot spots, yeah.
In those wires.
Yeah, you
So
think-
in a typical install on the residential, does that include all of the electrical, or do you have to bring an electrician to tie everything in?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Have to bring a
Norm-
licensed electrician.
Norman's question is, whenever you're doing an install of panels, do you bring in a licensed electrician, or does the installation from the company handle the electrical?
Yeah, a lot of times you've got a crew that will come in and install the racking system, the modules, and they'll run wiring to the inverters. And then you've got your master electrician or journeyman that's running everything from the inverters into the electrical panel or the meter. So you do have to have a licensed electrician on site for these installations. Encore, GCC, yeah.
Yeah, so is this something, my question is too, do you get a you get a permit, right? You have to get a permit and the electrician has to pull a permit.
Right.
So so it's outside of the city limits that you don't have any other regulation. But the
utility
solar
company-
panel companies,
Yeah.
are they regulated to do it right from an electrician standpoint?
So what's going to happen is even if you go into GCC in the county, GCC is going to come out and do an inspection before they allow that system to be interconnected. So there is somewhat of an inspection, but solar is really new around here, and I'm not going to act like every inspector out there
Knows
knows
what
what to
they're looking
look for.
Yeah, just like we don't know. I mean, this is new
Yeah.
for all of us.
And it's like you're saying, in my case, I'm stating the obvious in a home inspection, you know, and what I can see. I'm not testing that system. I'm not testing as far as the, you know, how well it's doing, what have you, but all the visual. There's just, you know, you also got to keep in mind too, is the type of material, type of shingles, you know, how the roof is roofed. You know, you've got 20-year 3-tab shingles that are cheap. You got 30-year architectural. You've got clay tiles. They're all installed differently, you know, and the systems have to be installed correctly. You know, the rail racking system have to be installed correctly per type of roof. So, I'm sorry.
So I bet you don't see much solar on slate tower.
I've seen
All
images.
over California.
Yeah, they're there. They're just, I haven't seen them up here yet, but I know they're out there. So that's just something it requires special drilling to get into that tile. You may have to properly secure it and proper torque. That's the other thing too. You know, if they're trying to be torqued a certain way, because you don't want to over tighten it, but then if you lose it too loose, then you got the wind just pulling on them and shaking them around and causing more damage. That's with the standard roof as well. So that has to be, you know, I talk about damage as far as being over tightened, but you also have the possibility if it's not tightened correctly and you just got it rattling and causing even more problems. So that's if it were me in my situation, if I was going to be purchasing a house or looking to put in a solar system, I would definitely consult the structural engineer, as he was mentioning earlier, and because the age of the house is definitely going to play a factor. Okay, so you've got to get that checked out for sure, and make sure that the roof is going to be adequate enough to support the weight of that house, the actual weight.
In the 12 years that I've been doing solar, I've had one roof in Los Angeles that we couldn't install solar on. So the modules are lightweight compared to how these structures were built. And I'd honestly probably say that the older structures are even better than the newer structures in most cases, because the wood that they used back then, like we're doing a bunch of projects in Illinois right now that they've got to fast track through permitting because of the type of roofs that were installed back in the 20s when these buildings were.
So for the last 15 minutes, I want you guys, I mean, y'all are asking great questions. Keep in mind, I talk to anywhere from 3 to 5 people a week moving to Texas from other parts of the country. We're a little bit slower to come around to solar, but as people are moving to this area from areas where solar is common, I think we will see more and more people put solar panels up. Don't be scared of them. It is something new. It is something different. You do need to slow down and you need to ask a lot of questions. I know you guys don't want to misspeak and have a liability situation later. So I will help you guys by providing some information from all of our great panelists that are here today so you guys can ask questions. And then they'll provide some more resources to you. Just factor in enough time to do your due diligence during option period is really, I think, the best way to approach that. And ask if you're going to list the property, again, ask all the questions, address some of these concerns so a buyer doesn't have to. And so that the seller's not surprised later that they have to pay for solar panels and coordinate getting them moved in hopes that they can use them again, which may or may not be a problem for them. So you guys aren't experts. I'm not an expert in this area, but we do have people in this area that are willing to help and answer those questions. Don't be scared of it because it's coming as people are moving to this area.
So Terry, on page 2 of your handout under fun facts, you talk about the property tax code, section 11.27. So is that saying that if they increase your value because you've added a system, that should come back off as 100%?
Yes, there's a,
Exemption? Because the reality is, from what we're hearing and learning today, is that most of these systems are not going to add value to the real property that we're licensed to list and sell and buy.
and as somebody that's in
So-
solar, I find that as a problem. I think
So-
that,
Repeat
I
the
don't
question
even
for
know how
them.
they
And then,
could even add value for that if the fee appraiser world and the lending world says, we can't give you any credit for that. If we can, it's surely not gonna be anywhere close to.
We don't have market
We don't
demand
have
for
a,
it.
we don't have an appraiser here to tell us what that is
Sure.
gonna
yeah,
be.
I find that interesting that you invest in a 30, 40, $50,000 system and an appraiser's not going to give you any value for that.
I know, I look to
It's
see
better
that
for a
change.
pool.
the other thing that I think that we'll see too, and I'm going to check with underwriting. If we can show proof that these people buying the house are going to take over a installment agreement, it's going to cost them $400 a month, but they don't have an electric bill. Why am I going to hit them? Like, can't I offset if I have the history of? And that's a question that I'm going to ask. If the answer is no, I feel like it's no now, but later it will be considered as an offset.
That's a
We'll
great
see.
point.
I mean, because
Yeah,
it's
because-
going to be, this is all new to everybody and it's going to change over time.
Yeah, if the system, if you're taking the money that you're saving that you used to pay to the utility and now you're just paying down a note,
Mhm.
it is an offset.
And at some point in time, it's got to be factored in.
And in most cases, a buyer is not just doing it for it to break even. They're saving 20, 30, 40, $50 a month. And that's the reason why they're doing it.
Sure.
Not taking into consideration the rising cost of electricity. So
Yeah.
they might have bought the system earlier this year.
It's truly fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Does anybody have any other questions? Are y'all confused or do y'all feel like you have a better idea?
oh,
What
yeah, we're scared.
I didn't mean to scare you guys. I just
No,
wanted
but
you
we
guys
need
to
to
be
know
really
these things.
mindful of what, it's not just cool that they have solar panels.
Right.
There's a lot more to it.
complicated mess.
It could be a complicated mess. It could be totally simple.
And the sellers, they don't see this side, our side of it.
No,
You know what I mean? Like, they don't understand all the things that.
they don't understand. All they think is, I'm selling you guys a house and you're not going to have electric bills. What's the big
They
hassle?
probably didn't put those in thinking that they were gonna sell.
No, I'm sure none of these sellers put those panels on thinking that they were going to sell in 2 years. Yeah, that was their forever home.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, there is a potential clawback. So that 26% federal tax credit, or
Oh,
2 years ago when it was 30%, if they're selling a house now, the IRS can come back and claw back some of those funds. I didn't even think
How
about
is
that.
yeah.
So it basically breaks down to 20% year over year. So if I bought a home or if I bought a system and took just call it a $3,000 federal tax credit, but I sell the home after owning that system for only
Oh, I
2
see.
years, they can come back and get, what is that, 60% of that
60%.
value.
Yeah.
So
Good
people
point.
should not be investing in solar unless they plan on keeping the home for 5 years.
Anything else from an inspection standpoint?
Yeah, what I was gonna say is regardless, as far as in your option period, if you communicate with, use my company, for example, and I happen to catch you because I typically will print out the Zillow or realtor listing and just try to get a little information on the house before I go out there. If you call whatever inspector, just give them a heads up, say, hey, there's solar panels out there. And you snap some pictures of it while you're on the roof. Get that additional documentation and get a report. Because I know if you had told me out, like I said, I already have kind of notes in there. I'll note FYI, solar panels in there. I can inspect the shingles underneath, what have you. But just gets additional pictures. So that way you can at least have that. So that way they don't come down the line and say, oh, it was damaged. Well, at the time of inspection, it wasn't. We didn't have any storms. Just kind of get a little documentation. Plus, hey, I got pictures now. You can go and do what you got to do as far as getting additional information to go forward with the purchase. But just keep in mind too, also, and I was gonna ask you about this, and you know, the solar panels are positioned on the roof to where they get the most exposure, correct? So, and in a house, the only thing we look at too is, okay, hopefully the installers were paying attention. They're not obstructing your ridge vent. Additional plumbing, the plumbing vents had to be relocated or moved, and then nothing was damaged there as far as like adding additional elbow, just making something, jimmy rigging it just to get it to work, which you don't want that. So, so things like that, we also look at to see, okay, was a flashing damage to this plumbing vent in the middle of the installation of the railing system. So, there's, things like that. It should be, I hate to say common sense because it's not there anymore in the society, but unfortunately, exactly. But just making sure that nothing else was hindered or damaged. The performance of the house itself wasn't jeopardized as well.
To his point, we all know that, like we've talked about, solar is pretty new to Texas. I mean, it's been growing for the last 4 or 5 years, but the issue is that all of these installation companies, there's a lot of people getting on board because there's a lot of money in the industry, and you got people out doing things that are not ethical, they're not installing correctly. So it is very important to have a proper inspection. I will say that.
So if you were here today for CE, be sure that we have all of your information so we can give you 2 hours of CE credit. And then Friday, again, make sure you registered on Eventbrite because that's how we're going to know who is here for CE and who's just here for information. I appreciate you guys showing up. Our next class is not next week because I'm going to be in Vegas for a sales conference. I think it's the following week. I think it's the 20. I don't remember. Look in your newsletter. If you look in your newsletter, you won't ever miss anything. But we're going to do a class on renovations. What renovation programs are out there. And I am going to be specifically asking too about solar panels. If someone were to want to have solar panels installed as part of the transaction, can we use our renovation loan program for that? Because that would be helpful for Terry. I know he doesn't do a lot of residential or much residential. Maybe if we had enough people needing his services, he would do residential, especially if we had some good financing sources. So be sure to sign up for that class. It is not a CE, I don't think. BJ can correct me. And then Lindsay asked for us to continue teaching through the summer. So on Wednesdays at 10 o'clock, there will be a class. Those won't be CE, but we're going to cover Google reviews. How do you get them and why do you need them? Why are they so important? We'll cover some of that stuff that you guys need from a business standpoint to make sure that people know who you are, where to find you, and what services you provide. So we'll cover some of that, and we'll cover some of the loan programs themselves. BJ, is the renovation CE? I don't think so. I don't remember writing that check to the state to get that licensed. So be sure to join us again for those classes. We'll do them again by Zoom. I do have better equipment, so we'll get better and better at doing it Zoom and in person because I like to offer that flexibility. And share this information with people in your office. Y'all, again, there's 700 and something licensed real estate agents in this area, and only about 35 or 40 of you guys heard this information. It's important. It's a big deal. So share this information, please. Yeah, great job. Very good job, panel. Thank y'all for bringing your knowledge and all of your questions. Unless you guys have any questions, we'll sign off. All right. I am off to get ready for a wedding. Not mine. Huh? No, Dylan's getting married. Yeah. I know. Yes, I did.